Hi everyone, Dr. Matt here and welcome to this short lecture on atherosclerosis. In this lecture we're going to cover what are the risk factors associated with atherosclerosis, the pathogenesis, so how does this disease manifest, and number 3, what are the clinical chronic complications associated with atherosclerosis. So let's start off with a definition. So the definition is atherosclerosis is a disease of the arteries characterized by fatty deposits in their inner walls. So let's start with the arteries. Over here, we've got a diagram of the body, and here we've depicted the big blood vessels, or specifically the arteries of the body. So the arteries that atherosclerosis most notably impacts are the big elastic arteries, such as the aorta, the iliac arteries, and the carotid arteries. And we also have the medium-sized muscular arteries, such as the coronaries in the heart, the renal arteries, the popliteal arteries, and the ones going up into the brain. So that's the arteries. In terms of the inner walls, it's essentially meaning that the fat deposit goes into the intima. So this is the tunica intima of the blood vessel. And we know that we have 3 layers. The intima is the most inner lining closest to the blood. So that's the part of the blood vessel that's impacted. And then we have these fatty deposits. Sometimes these are known as fibrofatty because they've got fibrous tissues such as elastin and collagen in there. But we've also got lots of fat. It's a fatty core that's friable, which means it's very fragile. It can break. And this is the complication that we'll talk about a bit later. But it's got a big fatty core which can become necrotic. And this is essentially where the crux of the issue lies. So there's your definition. Let's move on to the risk factors. The risk factors I'm going to break into 2 categories. So the first category are what I'm going to call non-modifiable, which basically means you can't do anything about these risk factors. The first one is age. Essentially what this means is atherosclerosis is a chronic disease. It takes a lot of time to develop. So as we get older, this disease has more time to develop. And we can basically see this when we get to the ages between 40 and 60, the complications associated with atherosclerosis increases by 5-fold. And that's basically because it's a chronic manifestation. It just gets more and more time to develop. Even though infants, babies, still have early signs of atherosclerosis like fatty streaks. But as we get beyond the age of 40, the risks and complications associated with atherosclerosis becomes heightened. Number 2 is biological sex. So basically what this means is males are at the highest risk of atherosclerosis, whereas females, particularly premenopausal, are basically protected against it. Now, once females get to menopause and postmenopause, that they will actually catch up to the male sex. So females, it seems that premenopausal estrogen is a protective agent to kind of counter the effects of atherosclerosis. But once menopause hits and postmenopause, females catch up very quickly to males. And interestingly, females that are postmenopausal that take estrogen replacement therapies, it seems that the estrogen is actually more detrimental and that makes the atherosclerosis worse. So we don't know exactly how estrogen actually works in terms of its protective effect with atherosclerosis. The third one is genetics in terms of the non-modifiable risk factors. Genetics is probably multifactorial, which means a number of familiar things that you may inherit from your parents can increase atherosclerosis. These could be things like hypertension, dyslipidemia, diabetes, things like that. But we probably have a good understanding that in some people, the genetics probably push them into states where they have high fat in their blood, and even the way that the fat deposits in the blood vessel may be at a greater risk. So genetics is also a really big one. Now we move to the modifiable risk factors. So these are things that you can do something about. Now there are a whole list of them, but I'm going to only list 4 main ones. Number 1, and probably the most powerful, is hypertension. What this basically means is hypertension, which is the pressure within arteries, puts shear stress on the walls of the blood vessel, which causes ongoing injury, and that basically leads into the pathogenesis, which we'll talk about. But when we look at the hypertension, it's not just everywhere. So this atherosclerosis doesn't occur in every single artery in the body. It seems to affect the arteries that have the greatest shear stress. So these would be in areas like the abdominal or the thoracic abdominal aorta, particularly on the posterior wall where the force of the blood is getting pushed onto the back wall of that vessel. We have the branch points. So branch points in the carotid, in the renal arteries seem also at a great risk because of the turbulence within the blood vessel. So hypertension is a really big risk. Number 2 is, I'm going to call it dyslipidemia. So dyslipidemia. Sometimes they use hyperlipidemia, which just means high fat in the blood, but I'm going to use dyslipidemia, which means disordered or dysregulated. And what that basically means is you have high amounts of the bad fat, we call these LDLs, low density lipoproteins, and a low level of the good fats, HDLs, high density lipoproteins. So the dyslipidemia is probably a more useful terms where you've got high bad fats, low good fats. The way that the fats kind of operate, it seems that at least the LDLs causes oxidative stress to the endothelial cells, but I'll talk about that when we do the pathogenesis. Number 3 is diabetes mellitus. I'll just put DM. Diabetes mellitus seems to increase the amount of fat within the blood, so that seems to be its greater risk associated with it. And number 4, smoking. Smoking has thousands of toxins in it, thousands of chemicals which can cause endothelial injury. There are many other modifiable risk factors, so certain inflammatory states, high levels of homocysteine, inactivity, alcohol, etc. So they're the risk factors. Now we're going to move into the pathogenesis. So the pathogenesis for today, what this basically means is the genesis, the creation of the disease. For this, I'm going to put 5 steps. So I'm going to come up with 5 steps on how this atherosclerosis process occurs. The first thing I want you to know is atherosclerosis is a chronic disease or chronic manifestation, so it happens chronically over time. What essentially happens is we have this ongoing injury and repair, injury, repair, injury, repair, and in this process, this chronic inflamed repair process, this is where atherosclerosis manifests. So the first step I want you to list and write down is the normal vessel. So we have a normal vessel operating before the atherosclerotic pathway begins. So when we look at a blood vessel, let's say we pull it from the coronary vessel. This is the coronary vessel in cross section. What we're going to look for is 3. So for a normal vessel, 3 main layers. We have the intima, which consists of a nice layer of endothelial cells with a basement membrane, a little bit of smooth muscle. Then we go into the thicker layer, which is the tunica media. That's filled with smooth muscle. And then outside that, we have a kind of connective tissue layer we call the adventitia. So we're going to have a normal vessel with those 3 layers operating nicely. The endothelial layer does its job. Its job is to contain the blood here, stop things sticking to it, and not allowing a nice laminar flow, a non-turbulent flow down the blood vessel. So that's step 1. Step 2, we're now going to move into the endothelial injury. Endothelial injury. So this is the first step, or the first disease step in the pathogenesis pathway. So what happens with endothelial injury? Well, basically it's these risk factors. So for instance, smoking causes toxic agents to irritate the blood vessel, or hypertension, too much shear force, and injures the endothelial cells. Lipids such as LDLs causes oxidative stress. In any case, we get this injury starting to manifest. Now what happens when we get the injury? We start to have things stick to it. So platelets will start to stick to the endothelial cells. Bigger cells like white blood cells will start sticking to the endothelial cells. And what they might start to do is release growth factors. They release growth factors into the wall or the intima of the blood vessel, and that's going to lead us to step 3. Step 3 is basically making the endothelium permeable. Endothelium becomes permeable. And what this basically means is things start to go through it. What we see most notably is LDLs. So the LDLs start to accumulate in the intima. These LDLs, these low density lipoproteins, start to accumulate in the intima, and they go through a biochemical modification and start to oxidize. And what this does is it further encourages things to go through the wall. Most notably, we start to see monocytes going through. So monocytes, because we did see the leukocytes starting to attach, but the monocytes start to squeeze through into this kind of developing fatty core. And what these monocytes will begin to do is they will change from a monocyte into a macrophage, and they will start eating up these LDLs. And this is going to essentially move us to step 4, which we call the fatty streak stage. And in this stage, we start to see an accumulation of these macrophages filled with these fatty molecules, and we're going to call these foam cells. So histologically, if you were to look at the blood vessel at this stage, this fatty streak stage, we would see these foam-like accumulations that will start to build up in the intima. Now, this is going to manifest over many years, decades. So what we're going to start to see here is the accumulation of this core becoming bigger and bigger within the intima. So the endothelial lining is still here, but what we see in the intima below the endothelial lining is these foam cells growing. Now, with the macrophages and the T lymphocytes, the white blood cells that are coming into the area, they're releasing lots of growth factors, which is changing the extracellular environment. So the other things we're going to start to see coming in here are collagen. So collagen will start to kind of intersperse in the foam cells. We also see smooth muscle cells moving in from the media, which also accumulates in with the foam cells. And the actual smooth muscle cells can also phagocytose and engulf these LDLs, which also make them foam-like in their appearance. So this fatty streak will just continue to grow and grow depending on the risk factors that are involved. Then we move to the last stage, the step 5, which is the advanced plaque. So it's really at this stage where probably the clinical manifestations will start to manifest, which I'll talk about in a second. But this advanced plaque is really where we start to see the problems occurring. So what we're starting to see is the size of the occlusion is getting pretty big. So it's starting to take up a lot of space within the blood vessel. Again, the endothelial cells are still lining the blood vessel, so they're still there. But we're just seeing a huge amount of foam cells. And what we're going to start to see is the middle part becoming this lipid core, which can actually start to see apoptosis. So the inner part becoming necrotic and dying off. Blood vessels will try to come in to feed this area, this growing area. There's a lot of connective tissue in here as well, and smooth muscle, particularly underneath this part. So it's becoming a quite established chronic plaque. Now, what's going to happen from here are the chronic manifestations. So this moves us into the third part of the lecture. What are the chronic clinical manifestations that you're likely to see with an advanced plaque? Well, most notably, what's going to happen is the blood vessel isn't carrying enough blood. So we're going to see ischemia in the area that it's supposed to carry blood to. So we're going to see ischemia to the brain, so early stages of reduction in blood flow to the brain. We're going to see a reduction in blood flow to the heart, so you might start to see ischemic heart disease. To the kidneys, so we're going to have problems with perfusing the kidneys, and then going down to the legs, so increasing the likelihood of peripheral vascular disease and gangrene in the lower extremities. So ischemia is going to be the first one. So chronic complications, number 1 is purely through stenosis. The example I'll give, stenosis, will stay in the coronary vessel. Once the stenosis kind of gets to about 60 to 70% occluded, we're going to start seeing the symptoms associated with this stenosis. Before that, even though the atherosclerosis is becoming more and more present, we're probably going to be preclinical. So we're not going to see many symptoms, but once we get to this kind of stage where 60 to 70% of the blood vessel is now occluded, there's reduction in blood coming through to feed the heart. So if the person was at rest or doing very minimal physical exertion, maybe we wouldn't see any problems. But once the person starts to exert themselves physically and we need more blood to the body, the heart itself is going to start to run out of blood itself. So that's from the stenosis. So not enough blood is getting past. And that's going to start to lead to ischemia. And this is what we call stable angina. It's a very predictable pattern of ischemia because it comes on with exertion, and that ischemia causes pain, and that's the angina that we see. So stenosis is kind of a critical stenosis, which is based on the advanced plaque, but just a reduction in blood flow. The number 2 is the unstable. The unstable plaque, which basically a number of things could happen. We could kind of take the top off it. So through ongoing hypertension, we take the top off that kind of endothelial cap and we expose this kind of collagen, which then causes a clot to start to form, which is a thrombus. And so a thrombus will start to form, and that's going to cause a critical reduction in blood flow. So if that is in the coronaries, that's going to potentially lead to unstable angina or even into a myocardial infarction. If that completely occludes the blood vessel, we have an MI. If that's in the carotids, that could actually break off and travel up as a embolus and go up to the brain and cause a TIA, a transient, or a ischemic stroke. Other things that could happen is blood can accumulate in here. So instead of the clot form there, we can actually have the blood vessels that are going there causes bleeding within that, and that's just going to also increase the size of that plaque, which again gets to a critical stenotic size. But in these cases, different to these are very unstable and can lead to very serious manifestations. Like I said, a heart attack or a stroke. And then number 3 would be more to do with the tunica media, which is the wall itself, and these would be aneurysms. And so with aneurysms, basically such as the abdominal aorta, so the triple A, what happens is the wall starts to weaken and it will start to bulge out or even increase the likelihood of rupture in itself. And so we have a rupture. An example would be a hemorrhagic stroke in the brain and blood spills out and the whole blood vessel breaks. So these are the 3 main chronic complications that we see associated with atherosclerosis. We see just general stenosis associated with just the atherosclerotic plaque getting bigger and bigger. We see an unstable plaque where it's more associated with a thrombus, and then we have aneurysms or ruptures which are associated with a breakage or a weakness in the wall. So there we have it. We've gone through atherosclerosis very briefly. We've looked at the definition. We've gone through the modifiable, non-modifiable risk factors. We've looked at the pathogenesis, and then finally, we've gone through the chronic complications that are commonly seen through this process known as atherosclerosis.